Hey everyone, in today's tutorial for WordPress, we're going to be talking about how to finally replace all of these static links on the sidebar with an actual dynamic sidebar that you can edit in your WordPress admin area. Now if we go to our widgets page right now, it'll just give us a message that says no sidebars are defined. That basically means we haven't told WordPress that there is a sidebar available to be customized. So that's our first step. So let's go into our tutorial folder and let's open up our sidebar.php file. Now you notice we have all these links here. Let's just get rid of that. We don't need those anymore. We don't need all these promotional extra speed links. So let's just leave it blank for now. Now I know you're thinking we probably want to put some code in here that tells WordPress that's where we want the sidebar. And yes, we will eventually, but first we want to go into our functions.php file and tell WordPress that we want to make a sidebar. And that's done by a function called register sidebar. And it takes one argument, and which is in an array. So I'm just going to space it out over multiple lines. Now just so you know, this parentheses ends the argument, this parentheses ends the array. So hopefully that won't be too confusing. Now the arguments we want, let's get my notes. First we want to give it a name. You don't have to do this if you're only doing one sidebar, but I prefer to do it anyway. So I'm just going to call it sidebar 1. As you remember, in an array, everything's separated by a comment. And we have a value called before widget. Basically, this is going to come before each widget. We're going to be putting everything in our sidebar in an unordered list, so before each widget, we're going to have an li. However, we're not just going to leave it at that. We're going to add some extra styling to it in case you ever want to build on it with CSS. We want to do ID equals and class equals. Now in order to tell WordPress we want to replace that with the appropriate ID and class, we do, hold on, okay, it's %1$s, %1$s. That tells it we want to replace with the ID, and the class is $2$s. Don't ask me how you're supposed to remember that. That's actually some PHP syntax, not WordPress itself. Next argument we want to put in is after widget. And that we're just going to put in a simple end li tag. That's going to be easier. So basically the widget is going to come between these two, between an li and an end li, which makes sense. It's the whole thing is going to be in an unordered list. Now we have a before and an after title, which is the title of the widget. For those of you who have worked with sidebars, you know that each widget has a title, that most of which are customizable on the widget interface. So on after title. And this is going to be the last argument, so I'm not going to put a comma there. Now before the title, I'm going to put in H3, and I'm going to give it a class of widget title. This is just going to be for styling later. Widget title. And after each title, widget title. After each widget title is just going to be an end H3. So now that I have my sidebar ready to go, in theory, I can just reload my page, and it'll be there. Unfortunately, just because we've told WordPress that this sidebar exists doesn't mean it's actually put on the page anywhere. So let's go back to our sidebar.php, and now what we want to type here is if function exists. We want to put in PHP, and actually there's part of this that you don't need that's actually for backwards compatibility, but if you're making a site for a theme that's going to be released to other people, you might want to have it in there, because I believe it's prior to WordPress 2.6 or 2.7 that they didn't have the dynamic sidebar function. Or you can be like me and just force them to upgrade your theme, which I think is actually a better idea, but it's up to you. Dynamic. Okay, now for starters we use a WordPress function called if the function exists, and that's dynamic sidebar. I'll move my mouse. And that basically says, is this function existent, or, well, exactly what it says. Does it exist or not? If it doesn't exist, then then we won't be able to do this. It prevents you from throwing an error. Now, the way WordPress has its sidebars echoed out, it's always been a bit strange, I've thought, but it's, yeah, you just deal with it. Now, basically, this is all the code you need to make a sidebar. Function exists, I just explained. Dynamic sidebar, sort of a strange function. It returns true or false for this if statement, but it also echoes out the function if it does exist. So just remember that. So if we have, and that basically says, is this sidebar existent or not, which we defined in our functions.php file. So we did define that, although I should keep it properly syntaxed and spaced. Now you can put in between these quotes something you want to appear if there is no dynamic sidebar by that name, or it's not available in the theme, but I'm not for now. Oh, and also, in addition to tabbing this, we want to put this in a UL, because WordPress is going to enter it out as a LI for each widget. So now, if we go to our admin area, I'm just going to reload this widget page, we should have one sidebar to work with. Okay, so I've added a few things to the sidebar. I've just kept with the default WordPress widgets. I haven't gone to any plugins yet. I probably won't for this theme tutorial because that'll just make it complicated. And now, when we go to our home page or any other page on the theme, we get an extremely ugly or unordered list on the side of our page. Now, obviously, I'm going to work on styling that so that it's not as ugly. But you can see how that is not part of our default theme source code, and yet it's there on the page, customized by the admin area. So that's how you make a dynamic sidebar in WordPress. Now, so let's just talk about styling for a minute. I'm going to open up our CSS file and go to the end, and I'm going to find my notes. Now, just remember, this sidebar right now is width of 230. That's something I changed from Daxterspeed's original site, just because it was originally, I believe, 130 pixels, and that just didn't look very nice. So let's start by styling the sidebar Li. Now, the sidebar is the div that contains everything on that sidebar. There are actually two divs within that div. That was Daxterspeed's design. So obviously, let's start with list style type is none. Margin is 0, padding is 0, things like that. I went over a lot of this in my comment when I was styling the comments for individual pages, so hopefully there won't be that much that I have to talk about. And actually, I want to take away this. Actually, no, I don't. Okay. Now that's for the each individual list item, but I'm also going to style the list itself. Because, you know, CSS is not compatible all over the place, with Internet Explorer especially, so I just tend to put margins of 0 and paddings of 0 on any element I can that I don't want padding or margins on. Now that'll style the main list, so if we load that up, it'll look better. In fact, it'll look great. And let's see. There is one other thing that I believe I wanted to talk about, but I can't seem to find it. Oh, right, the Sidebar H3. Sorry about that. I'm just going to style this a bit differently. I'm going to add make it a bigger font size. And I'm going to give it a margin of 0. I think Daxterspeed might have already added this somewhere above in his theme, but I just have these as my notes. So if we add that, now they look a bit more like headings. Now actually, I meant to write 10 here. That's just to give a margin of 10 beneath each LI between each widget, so that you have more space. Now I remember. Okay, so we have that, but if you noticed, if we went back to it for a quick second, that now every LI has too much space under it. So I want to fix that right now. And now we want to go UL, LI. That's basically a list item that's within an unordered list that's in an unordered list that is in another unordered list. Sorry, that took me a while to say. So I'm just going to do border 0, padding 0, and margin 0. That will get rid of any extra padding we have on any sub-elements. One other thing I'd like to add, if you want to add a border around each widget, sidebar UL. I'm not going to try and say that again because I didn't do very well. Actually, this is something else. This is going to add a margin to anything that is a few levels in. I know this probably won't come out very well on here, but if you have a list of all the pages on your site, it will be easier to see what's a subpage of what. And I just noticed I missed two things on my code here. Under the li code for each one, I wanted to add a border around each widget, so I'm just going to do border is 1px solid black, and padding is 3px, which actually contradicts what I have up there, but okay. So now if we reload that, now each widget will have a border around it, and you can clearly tell what's a widget, where each one ends, and where each one begins. In our next tutorial, I'm going to talk about how to add multiple sidebars to your site.